And we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live stream on LinkedIn. I have a very special guest today, Greg Tomczyk. I am so excited to chat with him. The conversations that I've had with Greg leading up to this have not been the typical conversations. Hey, will you join me live? Hey, will you come chat about XYZ topic? It was very organic, very natural. And so we're going to have fun with this one today. It's not going to be a typical keynote type speech. It's not going to be very written out. It is going to be very raw, very vulnerable. So, Greg Tomczyk, if you do not know who he is a former professional baseball player turned cybersecurity strategist and award-winning coach. So he's now the CEO of Valor Security, Cybersecurity, and he's advised 250 global brands, including American Airlines, Caterpillar, and has been featured on numerous news streams like ABC, Fox, Inc. magazine. So Greg was recently named a top 40 under 40 by Old Dominion University for his impact on business and cybersecurity. So Greg, welcome to the show.
Lauren, thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to diving in with you. I love this show and I'm excited for where we're going to take this conversation today.
Absolutely. So, one thing that we talked about whenever we went through all the different things that we could chat about on this live was you mentioned to me that everyone loves to talk about success, the wins, the growth, the highlight reel. This is a big thing on LinkedIn. People just like to share the highlight reel, the accomplishments, because it's social media and you want to put your best foot forward. But one thing that was really interesting about you is you also agreed with that, but I feel like you are one that's not going to do that. You're going to put your honest feedback forward, the honest things that have been going on in life forward, and you're going to show that to people. So I kind of wanted to really capitalize on that, talk about real life shit, because people don't always talk about that stuff on this platform. That's not a very common thing, but it's a common thing that we all experience. It's like the elephant in the room for everybody all the time. And so I really wanted to dive into that. But before we do, for people that aren't all the way familiar with you and your career, can you give me like a high level overview of where you started with pro baseball and how you got to where you're at?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a military born kid, had a sister that went through the heart transplant process. So, a lot of adversity as a kid, family wise, but had a great grounding of family. So I had that foundation and I've always looked for that in the environments I was in. I decided to choose the sport that had the most failure, which is baseball. You fail, 8 out of 10 times, and you can be a professional athlete at that level, which is very unique because, if you think about business, people are not failing that much. Obviously, they're failing each day, but there's a lot more success that comes along with it. So I had that kind of muscle, that failure fitness muscle developed early on through that military mindset that my parents gave me, and then through baseball. And then throughout college, I almost failed out of school. So I look back at these points in my journey that I learned the most, and they were the moments where I thought everything was over, right? Like life is over as it stands, and that those moments are what took me to play professional baseball because the scouts typically they look for talent, but one of the scouts that drafted me into Major League Baseball, he said, "Your character and your ability to stay composed during points of failure is why we want to draft you." Obviously, I was a good baseball player. I was throwing 95, which is good at college. But when you get to the professional ranks, everybody throws that.
Yep.
But you see that the character muscles are what really help people climb that corporate ladder of professional sports. And that's something I took into business early on is I wanted to ask the veterans of the business world, what was the hardest part of building this, or what was your lowest point? And I found that many people didn't really contextualize that well. And they almost like forgot about it, like PTSD, like they forgot about that moment and were trying to bury the hard parts of their life and business, thinking that it would go away. And you could feel that not necessarily emptiness, but you could feel the the rawness of that moment for them, but they didn't know how to contextualize. So I wanted to find a way throughout my career and in my community locally, to really help people, first expose them to my dark moments. I think that's where people start to open up to say, wow, if he's sharing it, I can share it as well. I call it the connected mindset, when people can come on and really share their not necessarily the things that they fear other people knowing, but the things that they learn the most from, that they can probably learn more from if they look back. And that kind of sparked me to think about, what is trust? How do we trust ourselves? How do we trust others? And how do we just be authentic? Because in a world of, the highlight reels on social media, people want authenticity, and it's not fake authenticity, but it's recognizing that just be yourself, be uncomfortable in being yourself at first, and eventually people will say, wow, those are one of the few people that are really speaking the truth. And that's what I need. I might not want to hear that now, but that's what I need to hear to be my best self, no matter what that is for you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So going back to the military thing, because I too was a military brat growing up, so we never lived in one spot more than 5 years, and I think that's something that a lot of people just kind of gloss over and say, military kid, okay, cool, next." But
Mhm.
that right there, that environment growing up can really impact your rest of your life on your ability to talk to people. And I say that I can make friends with a wall because of it. So what branch of the military?
Navy. Both my
Navy.
parents were Navy. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So how often were you guys moving, or were you pretty centralized?
We moved a lot when I was younger. So like as I was developing, like what is life, what is culture, what is, how do people get supported by their parents, and just different things of that nature. How do kids interact
Mhm.
in a healthy way? All the way till I was probably 7 or 8, we were moving to different places every 2, 3 years. So it was, we did Key West, we did Pensacola, Memphis. We had all the stops
Yeah.
in the traditional Navy route, and then ended up in on Little Creek in Virginia Beach, and stayed there all the way through school, which was a huge blessing because you get that foundation and you get
Mm.
grounded in a community which is the biggest Navy base in the world, and a lot of activity in and out. So you still get that diversification of personnel and culture, but to have a home base to go back to is something I've always found peace for myself in.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's something that you can a little bit more reliable than constantly having to uproot your entire life and meet a bunch of different people and uh, just learn different cultures, because every state has different cultures. The East Coast is very different than the South and
Right.
than the West Coast. And so when you have to learn that at an early age, you really learn how to talk to different kinds of people of all walks of life. So
Mhm.
I always say military brats made really great business owners.
Yeah, yeah, they really do. I think the mental fitness, the uncertainty, like travel could happen at any time. I think a lot of that as a kid, when I look back, those are foundational skills I use today as an adult, whether
Yeah.
it's with my kids or in my business with the people on my team. And I think it all goes back to being a good teammate, because when you're in a military family, every person in the family kind of has to be a teammate to support that person who's going abroad, or supporting and serving our country. So it's very important and foundational, and I speak a lot about it. Not a lot of people speak about their childhood, but I think it's so foundational to the person I am today and the person I'm becoming, that I like to hit on it because it's very important to who I am and what I'm made up of.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's a good testament for challenges too. Even challenges early on don't seal your fate in the future, because there's some people that'll really ride in that and just they
Mhm.
have a lot of unresolved trauma, if you will, or unresolved issues and situations from in the past. And so sometimes people they hold on to that and it really impacts their work. So being able to turn that around, and we were talking about it before we got on the show. I heard this quote recently, and it said, "Stop living life like you're losing." And I think that's really important, because all the stuff that we're going to talk about today, about all the hardships and everything that we faced, you can really look at it one of two ways. You can look at it like this thing is really going to hinder me. This thing causes so many issues in my life. I can't possibly get over it. There's no way you can understand this thing because this is the biggest thing in my life. It's the biggest thing that's impacted me. But if you can constantly work at it, like you were saying, and start to shift your attitude and constantly check yourself, you can use that for benefit.
Absolutely.
So tell me about baseball and that transition from baseball to business. Were you wanting to take baseball further? Did we have an injury? What was that transition there?
Yeah, it was a big crossroads for me. I was an entrepreneur before I got into baseball while I was at Old Dominion, and that's a big part of the 40 under 40 and some of the things I'm doing to give back to the school that helped me lay the foundation for my business life. And I took that business into baseball kind of as part time. We had a team that was doing software development around the clock, and I was kind of just would spend a couple of hours on it. But I loved the building process, so that I always took that into anything I did.
What was the
That business,
business?
it was a software development company
Okay.
doing websites and applications, and I was the first student to go through the entrepreneurship center that started at Old Dominion, and I was like, "What does every student need to start their company?" And at that time, it was a website or some type of application to market their business. And we built it up. Had great success. We're able to serve one of the top yoga studios in the country, and got a lot of good, I guess, business experience under my belt. But had a cyber attack 2 years into playing baseball. So it was 3 years into the company, and I didn't know what cybersecurity was then, and that's what propelled me to get into that industry. But ultimately, as I was in my third year of baseball, I was 25 years old. I was competing against 18-year-olds. We were all kind of similar skill set wise. I still had that character trait that was helping elevate me slowly through the ranks. And you reach a point, it's kind of like a glass ceiling, I think, of a lot of people, where you have two ways to go, and one route is like it's like almost like an idea or dream, and then the other route is like, I'm so passionate about this, I can't hold myself back from starting more companies. Like, it's baseball is going to become something that I push down, and I didn't want to ruin the idea, the concept, my love for the game, because I had this passion for entrepreneurship and starting companies. So basically went to the leadership of the organization and said, "Hey, how fast can you move me up to the big leagues?" And basically, you go through these 7 levels of the minor leagues to get there. And there was a lot of people ahead of me that had to get their spot in the spotlight, proverbially, before I was going to get there. And I kind of had to reach a decision: did I want to wait that amount of time, or did I want to go, do something that was really burning in my soul, burning in my heart? And decided to make the pivot out. It was on good terms. I didn't have any injuries, anything of that nature. But I knew that I wanted to impact people more than just going up to the fans and saying, like, "Thanks for coming to the game." Like, I wanted to go back to my community, go back to the other communities I was a part of, and have an impact while I had that fire, versus getting out of baseball and then trying to find myself again, which I had to go through that find myself or find my identity multiple times over and over again. But that was kind of my pivot point. Decided to go work for cybersecurity entrepreneurs, built 2 companies for other people. And I say I played Monopoly with their money for a couple of years while I figured out what is not necessarily growing a company look like, but what does scaling a company appropriately look like. And that's to me keeping the culture and that initial mindset and framework in the company as it grows from 0 to 10 to 100. A lot of companies, those values get pushed down, or they get overwritten throughout that process. And we saw that through the military. They have such core values that stay strong,
Mhm.
and they're not going to change. Like, they are something that, initially when the military was created, these are the values we need to have. As things adjust, we'll adjust those values. But I wanted to build something like that and build a team where those values were front and forward. And that kind of led me into business. Obviously, that was a long road of mistakes, and got investors. They weren't the right investors. Saw kind of who are the right people to surround myself with and who aren't. So, like, all of those hard lessons, and I go back to the success piece that we started the episode with. I've learned the most from the missteps and falling off falling into the water, or the burning situation, that when I feel like everything is over, the business is over, the relationship's over, the my life's over. And that's where I've learned so much that has set me up to have at least decent perspective as I wake up in the morning and say, what can I do today to just take one small step forward in that impact I'm trying to make, versus, how can I change the world? And I found that those small steps have added up over time to help me make the change that I want to make. And going back to one of the, I know you mentioned the quote about that you heard in church, but one of the quotes I love to go back to is, at one point in time, I said I would be happy when I reached where I am today. And that's something that really resonated with me when I heard it the first time. It kind of put the shock through my body, because it's such an important thing that we stay present. And presence is something that's spoke about so much. But I feel like when you're being authentic, you're being present, because you're not thinking about the past or the future. And that's how my business career has been, where I've just kind of trusted the process. They used to say that a lot in baseball, is just trust the process, and ask the right questions. And that's kind of set me up to build what I wanted to build and continue to build it and be excited about it.
I feel like that's a hard pill to swallow, is that you said you would be happy when you are, or where you're at right now. What was it? Tell me one more time.
Yeah. Yeah. So at one point in time, I said I would be happy with where I am today. Like, I said I would be happy, but I'm still not. And
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of us fall into that trap of more and more and more, or achieve that next thing. And I'm not going to be happy until I get there. And then the yard line keeps moving.
absolutely. And it'll keep moving. I don't think it'll ever stop. And that's a good lesson, even if you aren't a business owner, no matter what you're doing, there's still that's a solid lesson. I think a
Mhm.
mic drop moment right there. Um, So what happened with your you had your cyber attack. So was that your how did that impact you? What did that moment look like? Walk me through that, because I don't know how many people have really actually experienced a cyber attack. I'm personally curious, because then of course I'm thinking like, oh, my business, what the heck? So walk me through that moment.
Yeah. So we had about 12 clients. One of our biggest clients was a yoga studio across the U.S. Had scheduling. Um, People were scheduling appointments to attend the classes 24/7. And we had about 100 individual websites for that one company. I think a lot of people think about websites as just one website, but you have multiple pages. And somebody did not like one of the territories we were expanding into, um, with their company. So they decided to pay somebody to hack that company's website. And we were obviously the support structure around it, and the developers and the hosters, things of that nature. And they basically put derogatory content across the whole website. And I was in spring training. It was 98 degrees in Florida. I was coming in from practice. My phone was blown up, and my business partner was like, "You need to check out XYZ company's website." So I checked it out. I was like, "This is I don't know what to do. Like, I don't really know how to navigate a cyber attack, because it was a persistent threat." So they kept kind of trying to log in and like overflowing the website. So when I think about cyber attack today, I think of stopping your operations. Like, a lot of companies can't stop operations and still be successful, for even a short period of time nowadays, because being online it's your lifeblood. It's your cash flow. So I had to try to put it out. And I didn't know what cybersecurity was before then. And as an entrepreneur, you need to understand what's the worst thing that could happen to your business. And in this case, it was the worst thing. We thought it was somebody unplugging, our computer or our server, but in reality, if somebody's corrupting it, that impacts our reputation and the others. So that's what our cyber attack looked like. When I went out and said, "What is the most painful thing, the biggest, worst situation I ever went through in my life, and how can I turn that into purpose, and how can I turn that into helping the person I was 4 or 5 years ago before I had that cyber attack?" And it was that cyber attack. It was cybersecurity. It was helping the entrepreneur that I was before I had it, or the business owner that I was before I had it, understand what cybersecurity is and how to put small things in place to prevent that from happening. And I've been doing that for the past 7 years. Obviously, helped other people build their company, and then about 3.5 years ago, started Valor out of downtown Norfolk, and it's been an amazing journey of just learning what it's like to turn something you're so passionate about and have such a purpose for into a scaling business that is continuing to grow organically. And people know us for what we do versus just being like, those are the cybersecurity guys and girls, but they know specifically what services we provide and who we provide it to. And I think that's something we all want to get to as business owners, where they say, I know Greg does, cybersecurity, but he does it for defense contractors and, business owners that are at this size and revenue. So it's all of those development steps that has led us to where we are today. And we're, still growing, but just going back to those hard moments, that cyber attack is ultimately what has set me up to build the business of my dreams. And that allows me to do things in my personal life that I want to do, and have an impact on Old Dominion and some of the people that helped me throughout the process. It's been an amazing journey, something I'm very grateful of, and just want to share the lessons learned so other people can do the same.
It's really symbolic of when you're in the trenches and it feels like shit has hit the fan. You don't know what to do. You're lost. Like it's all that's your responsibility, even though it wasn't you as a business owner doing that. That is on you. And so being able to climb out of that hole, you're still gonna live. You're still gonna keep going, and you have, and then you're here. I think that is really symbolic to a lot of things that other people could be experiencing as well. So,
Mhm.
how did you get out of that? So, I see the moment. I see that it was impacting your biggest client. How did you guys overcome that? Did it shut the business down? Were you able to recover it? What happened?
Yeah, we tried to call local cybersecurity companies. Most of them around here were serving the government. We called companies in DC. They were like, "You're kind of too small to investigate this." They kind of swept it under the rug, like it doesn't matter. We called the FBI. We ended up spending about $75,000, which was a little bit under what we had in the bank account, kind of sitting, which is not typical. To get out of it and get our client back to 100% operations. But that having to spend that amount of money and going through that whole situation, reputation wise, we ended up shutting down the company probably 30 to 60 days later. So it was in that time frame after we figured it out, we ended up shutting down the company just because it threatened our systems. So that's a big piece of trust, and we can get to that in a little bit. But I think a lot of people, they don't know what trusting technology looks like. And I learned what it looks like to lose that trust, or for somebody else to lose that trust in you. And that was a reset moment for me to say, it's probably best we shut this company down and take a reset to figure out how we can prevent this for others going forward. So we said people need marketing systems, but if they can't protect them, it could take down their whole company. And we felt it. So we were like, we need to turn this pain into a new purpose. And that's exactly what we did.
Did you ever have the thought when you decided that you needed to shut the company down, it was too much, you invested all this money to turn around, whatever. Did you have that thought of, I don't want to go back to owning a business. This is too much. I don't know. I've failed, even though it wasn't you. Did you have that failure mindset, or were you able to get out of that pretty quickly? Did you always have a positive mindset about it? Because I feel like that's a really big moment, and just learning how to move away from that failure, for lack of a better term, I'm sure was very
Mhm.
challenging.
Yeah, I knew that I didn't want to feel what I was feeling ever again, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So I didn't start a company for another 6 years or so after that, because of that scare. Like, I could have done it at any point in time,
Mhm.
transitioning between jobs and building up companies, because I was doing exactly what I would do as a business owner for these people, because they saw that entrepreneurial spirit, and they were like, go build this service line, or tell us how to improve our revenue streams. Like, I was doing the things that I could have done as a business, but there was always that thing in the back of my head of what if I start this thing and then have another attack like this. And
Yeah.
that was something that it was deep in my nervous system. I had to kind of get it out of there. But eventually, I had the awakening moment of, if I'm not gonna look back and have regrets, I'm gonna start the next company, and I'm gonna do it in a way that helps other people prevent what I went through. So it kind of, that passion and that burning fire to wake up and say, I'm gonna make sure other people don't feel this way, one at a time. I think that's the only reason that Valor and that I am still, in business with Valor, is because I have that pushing me forward, or it's kind of like pulling me forward, where it's like, if you want to stay in bed, or if you want to, avoid this business for a week, like, we're going to just kind of tap you forward, because we know that passion's inside you to help just that next person. And I think each of us as business owners need something like that to keep us pushing forward, because there's so many dips, failures, downsides of owning a business, hiring the wrong people, having to, fire them, or they quit, they steal information, getting investors that are not right, and going through all that untangling process. There's just so many things that can go wrong in business, that if you don't have something like that pushing you forward, it's going to be hard to find peace, to find success, to find fulfillment, whatever those words mean to you.
Yeah, it's your why. I've spoken on that before with young professionals, and I feel like it might have fallen on deaf ears a little bit, because when you're in the beginnings of whatever, finding a really good job, trying to move up the ladder, trying to start a business, you're not really thinking about your why. You're thinking about all the logistical sides of things, and the why can be a little bit more of that emotional piece. But I mean, your why can be anything. It can be money, it can be influence, it can be helping others, which is what yours definitely is. And so I've always tried to look at my why is, okay, I want to make an impact. That's mine. So how do you make an impact? And I think it does go back to that helping people. So that's a really good thing to identify in yourself if you haven't already. I think that's very beneficial to keep you waking up in the morning and keep you going down that path. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
wow. That's I can only imagine how that would feel, just losing control and not being able to do what you were really passionate about. Do you ever have regrets of working for companies longer and not starting your firm sooner? That 6 year, 7 year gap, is that a regret, or do you think that it was all beneficial? Do you still have unresolved feelings on that one?
Yeah, I think I could have learned a lot quicker. I think that's what entrepreneurship does, is I could have probably taken what I learned in the 6 odd years, and started a company and learned that maybe in a year or two. So what entrepreneurship does when you start a company, it hopefully time collapses the learning process. So the first, 2, 3 years are just a dumpster fire. Like, you're trying to do all different services, you're trying to serve everybody. And then you finally find a niche, hopefully 3 or 4 years in, where you're like, I serve this person in this way. And that's where businesses can scale, and you can set culture and things of that nature. Um, so I don't regret it, because I was able to work for some of the best people in cybersecurity, because it was still early on. Everybody in cybersecurity was they were retired military, they were FBI, they were law enforcement, intelligence. There wasn't a lot of private sector, or even like former athletes in cybersecurity. So when I came in with an athletic mindset and that, like, culture first, character, let's use cybersecurity to actually help the everyday person, the everyday business owner, and bring it down to their level. These people, the leaders, were like, wow, we could really use this to our benefit as a company, like this mindset, this person that can speak about it and translate it. And it was kind of a radical idea. It sounds like something that would be, rudimentary in an industry that's growing, but they were still very government focused. So having the experience to go through that and learn that from other people, that's what has set me up to build the company I built. I believe I would have built a way different version of Valor 6 years ago than I decided to build when I started it about 3 years ago. And I think all of that experience set me up to build it in the right way. I look at it now. Um, but I wouldn't trade anything for the people that I met, the conversations that I had, the hard times that I went through with them. I was able to do some incredible things that most people in cybersecurity will never be able to say they did, because I like leaned into people and was like, hey, I have questions. Like I want to find a way to learn from you, because you have 30, 40 years of experience in this space, but I want to try to teach you something that I learned through my career. I mean, it was kind of that win-win situation that really set me up to get clarity. We all want clarity in life, and I feel like I would have started a company with a lack of clarity. Maybe I would have gotten that earlier, but I feel like all of that experience has really teed me up to have more clarity today, because I can always go back to those people and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Can you help me through it? And I think we all we all need those experiences. So that's why I always encourage folks, if they're going to start a company, make sure they have a crew, a team that's going to support them. Like getting out of college and starting a company as a one person show, it's very hard if you don't have somebody to ask questions to. But if I think that's why a lot of people go work for others first, is you start to build that community, build that clarity. And that's something I recommend anybody do. But if you have that crew, that support system, you can start a company when you're in your teens. And we've seen it happen where they have that support system. And that's super important for my journey, and what has gotten me to a point where I feel like I'm building a company that is right for me and right for the people who are on that team, versus trying to shoehorn people into a vision or a shareholder value equation that a lot of companies sometimes get into.
Yeah. When you if on that note, so if you're trying to start a company, and it is very I did it. It's very challenging to start a company as one person fresh out of college, and I'm very fortunate that we're still breathing, but there are times where we're hanging on by a thread, and it's tough. It's very tough. And one thing that I've always wanted is just some kind of business owner friends that could understand, but nobody does exactly what I do. And so it's been very frustrating in my personal journey because I have nobody. It's just me in my mind. And I mean, I have a team obviously, but nobody's really understanding those moments that as a business owner, as a founder, that you have to go through because you're the only one really experiencing them. So what advice do you have for people if they, because not everybody's going to have those funds to be able to bring somebody on right away and say, all right, you're going to be my business partner. There's some people that are like, good luck. All my friends, they work for people. They're like, I can't do what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head without me even saying it. It's a very lonely journey.
Yeah.
You have to have that burning fire to make an impact. For me, it's to make sure nobody feels that shocking feeling of unknown
Yeah.
from a cyber attack. You have to have that first and foremost. You have to understand that it's going to be lonely. I think being realistic is very important. Like people see the highlight reel on social media and the Porsches and people, driving cars, but it's like you hadn't seen the 10 to 12 years it took to get them there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I tell people there's no way around the entrepreneurship fire. Like you have to go right through it. And when you're going through it, most people look graceful when they're doing it, but inside they are going through like the hardest battle of their of their life. And what's cool about it is a lot of people forget what that fire felt like, but the people on the other side that are like, wow, I want to go tell other people about this fire. Like if I can find more people like that, like I'll sit in a room all day and like have these conversations about what was the hardest thing. And that's what I tried to ask people when I was first starting my company. I was like, I've done this for other people. Like, what burning boxes or what, landmines do I need to be looking out for? And most people would just be like, you got to find a way to pay payroll. And I'd be like, I know that, but what else?
Yeah.
And that's why I ended up starting the Connected Mindset Live, the show, because I wanted to bring people who weren't in my area to kind of the communities that were asking similar questions, and help people have breakthroughs, because I feel like that's something that really fires me up when I can connect two dots, which is super important. And that's That's one of those things that I feel like everybody needs to.
Here we go. This is, I think, the best definition if you can define what it's like to be a business owner and be in
Yeah,
business. And that is the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, the Elmo dumpster fire.
mm, yeah. But I tell a lot of people today when I go speak at conferences or to other entrepreneurs is a lot of people focus on what they need to do versus what they need to not do. And I think that's what's empowered me over the past year. I feel like I'm still in the dumpster fire, but I've been able to kind of take a deep breath up a little bit, because of all the things I learned from people, and just being inquisitive has time collapsed it a little bit. But I think it's important to realize what you need. Like, what's going to make you a great business owner is not just what you do, but what you don't do. Avoiding things, like not leaning into problem areas, vices, doing things are wrong to you, and like not building. I talk a lot about trust, but like when you make promises to yourself and then you break those promises, those are things that you shouldn't do, and if you do them, it's going to make you a way better business owner. And I think that's very hard when you're going through hard times, is to avoid the comfort, like the comfort blanket. So that's something I've learned the hard way. Is just I used to find fulfillment in the things I was doing, like waking up at 6 a.m., going to run, going to yoga, going to get a lift. I'm doing like 3 or 4 a days, and I'm like, I feel great, but my business is terrible.
Yeah.
And I was avoiding, the things that I shouldn't. Like, I would do all the right things, and then I would fall into like, a vice. Like, I'd eat a whole pizza, or like I would overindulge in something. So, which I knew on the other side of, I only needed to eat half the pizza. I didn't need to eat the whole thing. And it was like, there's nothing wrong with that
Yeah.
necessarily. But that for me was like, I need comfort after doing all the right things. And versus saying, I'm going to eat a piece of pizza a day. So it's kind of that taking a chunk out of it versus finding that comfort blanket. And when I avoided the overindulgence, I felt better, more clear, and I was able to eliminate the things I knew I needed to eliminate, not for the long term, but just for that period, to get myself to the next level. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does, and it kinda surprises me to hear you say that you still feel like you're in that dumpster fire for your company, because when you do research on you, when you look into what you're doing, you're speaking at keynotes, that's how we met. You are traveling around doing a lot of different conferences, you've worked with American Airlines, you've worked with these big brands, Caterpillar, and to hear you say that you still feel like you're in the dumpster fire kind of took me back for a second. It surprises me because you never know. You
Yeah.
absolutely, you never know where somebody's at, and you can have a really good face. But saying that, question for you, does that not, by being vulnerable and saying, nope, I'm the first one to admit our company is currently, we're still in that dumpster fire stage, does that not intimidate you at all, by being open and honest on live and saying that, because of the companies that you do work, the caliber of the people that you're working with? Does that scare you at all, by talking about this kind of stuff and knowing that you work with them and hoping they don't see that? Or is that just part of that vulnerability, and if you work with me, work with me?
Yeah, I think that's why I love working with companies under 100. Like, we work with a lot of companies under 100, defense contractors, retired military people who start companies. And these are the conversations that I have with them, like at the board table or at the end of the year. It's like, what were your challenges, like personally and professionally this year? Like, things of that nature. And I think that's why they decide to work with, us as people, is because we take that, people say people first approach. And that's really sometimes how do I get the most out of people versus how do I connect as people first, and then we get business done, in order to elevate that people equation. So I'd say 95% of our clients work with us because of that people aspect. So I don't feel uncomfortable saying that. One of the things I always push our team to do is just be better and better and not get comfortable. Because when we get comfortable, maybe we have some money in the bank that we know is going to pay the next payroll, and we're not at a point, we're at a point where we can take a deep breath, like take that deep breath but keep moving, versus saying I'm gonna take a month off because we don't need to make next month's payroll. So I try to keep pushing them in that nature. It doesn't mean we're unstable as a company. It means we're not at the place that we want to be, but we're
Yeah.
satisfied that with what we've built. And we know that we're us as experts in cybersecurity, like our skill set is in high demand. And
Mhm.
we know that. And I think that grounds us and our clients to say we can depend on them when we need them most. And that's ultimately why I wanted to build the company, is so somebody can pick up their phone if something is going wrong or they have a obstacle in cybersecurity, whether that's compliance or they need to answer to a regulator. They can pick up the phone and call us and actually talk to a person that's an expert to say, I need your help, and to give them that peace of mind during that situation. And that's going to have ups and downs. I think anybody that says their company's at a perfect revenue stance, they're growing at 10x per month and nothing's going wrong, those are the people that are creating a false picture for people, and it sets people up for failure. And I want to be a person that can give the real honest journey I went through.
Yeah.
Hopefully somebody can learn something from it, but set them up for success versus giving them information that makes them feel good and then setting them up for failure by giving them false hope or a false path. So that's ultimately why I do what I do. That these types of conversations are conversations I have with my clients who are running multi-million dollar businesses, and these are the conversations everybody wants to have, but they shy away from them because they care about what the person on the other end is going to think of them. And ultimately, the other person's not thinking about, they may be watching this. They're not thinking about Greg and what Greg has gone through. They're thinking
Yep.
about what they are going through and how
Yep.
this information helps them sort through what they're going through
Yep.
individually. I think that's so important for everybody listening in today to hear, is that you're thinking about what they're thinking about you more than they're actually thinking about you. So
Yes. Yeah, it's the trust paradox. I mean, that's entirely accurate. The book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I talk about this way too much. I should probably stop talking about it, but it is true. And I will die on this hill. I've had some people challenge me on it, but I will die on this hill that everybody is inherently deep, deep, deep down concerned with themselves. And I've had full on arguments about this with people, but I think very deep, you can care about other people. You can help other people when you don't want to, but there's that core reason of satisfying yourself. And I think that's how people listen to podcasts. It's exactly what you're saying. You're thinking about you and how those situations apply. So,
mhm. Yeah, self-discovery. I feel like
mhm.
there's this shift now with the internet and the information out there. There was a lot of development and self-development and self-growth, and everything that kind of people bucket like Tony Robbins or Dean Graziosi or some of
Mhm.
these other folks into, but really they understood it early on. It's all self-development. So as they speak on stages, they're thinking about what is the conversation in that individual's head and how can I bridge the gap, versus saying like, here's all my accomplishments, here's a solution to all your problems.
Yeah.
um, that is where growth happens in the individual, is when they are open to self-discovery, to discovering the things in themselves that are going to help them feel, think,
Mhm.
and act better for for their journey, for their mission. And that's something whenever I speak, and it was a huge pivot point for me to understand that, because I stopped talking about Greg and started to talk about everything my being and my soul and my mind has learned that I feel like could help that conversation going on in the person listening. And
Mhm.
it sounds complex, but it's super simple. It's like, what questions are people listening in today asking? And they probably asking a lot of the questions that we've talked about. But what's going to help them get that next breakthrough? It's the experience somebody else has had. It's not the step by step process.
Yeah. And on that note, it's a little bit of a shift, but one thing that I was thinking about as we were talking is things don't always go right. Things don't always go according to plan. 99% of the time, they're not going to go right. They're not going to go according to plan. And it's one thing to say that, but it's another thing to live that out. And so for me personally, when we're not hitting the benchmarks that we set out for revenue goals, or we don't have the employee size, or we're supposed to hire on this person, we haven't been able to do that yet, whatever the case may be, we're still surviving, we're still operating, we're still serving clients, we're still getting new clients. But because I didn't hit those goals that I had set in my mind as the entrepreneur, you feel almost like a failure. And so that's where I think, going back to what we were talking about earlier, of not treating every day like you're losing, but treating days like you're winning. I think that's very important. But one thing that I was going to touch on is, for me, I think there is a sense of punishment, as weird as it sounds, as being that owner. Oh, I didn't hit this. Of course, I'm not going to punish my team. I'll punish myself. So when I said, oh, whenever I hit this client goal, when we get this new client, we're going to go out to dinner, and we don't go out to dinner. And as you were saying that, I was like, you know what? I've done that. I still do that. I said, a few clients ago that we were going to go out to dinner, and we still haven't gone. And Fogo de Chao, like, nice meal, right? But it's like, no, I'd rather keep that money and put it somewhere else. I don't deserve that. And so I think that's a real thing too, that nobody talks about. And it's not just business ownership, it's anything. If you don't hit your benchmark, something goes wrong, you just think that you don't deserve it. And I think that's a very real conversation. Do you ever experience that, where you kind of find yourself punishing yourself in some weird way? Or
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I've done a lot of and this is something when you make a big transition like military to the civilian world, or baseball to the civilian world, some type of drastic pivot. There's a lot of, they say, like, masks that you wear, a lot of identities you try to wear to fit
yep,
in. And
yeah,
I had to go through a lot of, obviously, my own self discovery, but like different talk therapies and life coaches, and just talking to different people to help me navigate the confusion that was going on in myself, and like what was at the root of why I was doing everything I was doing. I was starting the next company to try to feel worthy of, the community. I was told when I was younger that I was too quiet, and I would try to have too deep conversations, and like, so I was going to speak to try to like make myself heard, because I finally developed my voice. And just like finding those core things, when you put your finger on it, and it's not like a perfect equation, but when you put a finger on it and say, I'm doing that activity and it feels so good because of this, because I'm like healing my inner child, my 7-year old that was told I was too quiet. And if you can find little ways to connect to that, like, what really makes you happy or fulfilled, like those words. Is it feeling like yourself, worthy, or that you have approval of others? And I think social media really expedites, or like expounds that, is like the approval of others and validation and all of these different types of things that come up. But I think each person should ask themselves, like, why are they doing what they're doing? It's not what do they need to do better, or how do they need to go about it to do it better. It's like, why are you doing that to start? And I think that links us all back to that, like, grounding feeling of, I'm doing it because of this. And it brings you back to like baseline, I guess you could call it, where it feels like you're on stable ground, at least for a minute. Like, going back
mm-hmm,
to your example, like, if you went back to your why when the end of the month happened, and you're like, I just want to make an impact on people, maybe that is going out to dinner because you feel like you're making an impact on your team. And that little burst of like good feeling and connection
mm-hmm,
indirectly may help you the next month reach that goal, or even sooner. So
yeah,
if you start to think about it in those in that format, it's almost, for some people, and we talked before the show about the work equation, like most business owners, they work 24 hours and they deprecate or deprive like their family, their health, their, all those different things. But one of the things I've discovered is, when all of those other things are good, your health, your family, you feel good about what you're doing, you're staying hydrated, like all the things we know we need to do, those indirectly grow your business and the other things that you're doing. But we often think we have to be 100% on something for it to grow and scale, versus doing all the other things right, and feeling like those are a deficiency for the business, versus those could actually be your biggest competitive advantage when other people are working 24 hours and you're working 4 hours, because you're mentally clear and getting things done. your business may just scale more by doing those things you know you need to do,
Have you
because it's building trust with yourself.
have you read the book 4 Hour Work Week?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was wondering. I'm like, is that where that one came from? But I think that's hey, I've heard it that nobody's going to realistically work 4 hours in a week. But I mean, I think it's possible if
It
you
is.
have your goals dialed in.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a lot to think about because
Yeah.
they're not people don't talk about this stuff when you are, I mean, it's hustle culture, I guess, is my younger way of saying it, millennial way of saying it. Hustle culture, I don't know if people are still saying that, but it's true. You see Alex Hormozy, some of these really big name business people talking about, I get up every day at 6 a.m. and then I go run and then I go do this and then I'm working and you have to work in the evenings. And for me, I've done that. I'm big gym rat. I've been very disciplined in the gym, track my food, whatever. And that's, yeah, sure, it'll make me more successful in some ways, but I don't think you can force it. And that's one thing that I've learned. I tried that 6 a.m. thing. I did it for 6 months and it was horrible. I mean, yes, I was more productive, but I think getting back into that and getting back, instead of waking up at 7:30 trying to get myself to wake up at 6 a.m., that causes more mental exhaustion trying to do that. So I don't think it's a one size fits all, and I think it's very unfortunate that a lot of people say it is. You have to get up early to be successful, and that's where you see entrepreneurs get, the most done. And I don't think that's always the case, but nobody talks about it, and then they could say,
Yeah.
oh well, you're not successful because you're not doing it. So
Mhm.
I just think that there's a lot, but it also goes back to that social media. People want the views, and they can get that very easily by being extreme. And so then you have this sick cycle of people assuming, oh, that's what I have to do, and not
Mhm.
necessarily the case.
Yeah, we could get way into the AI and technical weeds, but I think a lot of people with social media, they outsource the hard thinking
Hmm.
that takes place in their brain. Like, what how do I need to lay out my day to be successful? And they go to somebody else's page and they're like, this person does this, this, and this, and I may
Hmm.
want to be like them. And then you get you do it for a week and then you're like, all right, I lost steam. But you have to kind of create it on your own, and you can't
Hmm.
outsource what feels right for you. And I think that's what makes this human experience so unique, in that we can actually choose what we do every day. I know people that get up at 10 a.m., they go get a workout and then they start working. It's like,
Yeah.
you don't have to do it that way. Or they sleep during the day and they wake up at night and work. There's people that have found success doing it in any format, any fashion, not doing any of the routines. Like, there's people that have found it, but they found success for themselves, not for worldly views. And I think that's an
Hmm.
important distinction.
Absolutely. And that's such a easy path to fall in with social media, especially doing stuff like this, is because you see what everybody else is doing. And it's really hard if you see that same thing all the time, even if you say you don't. I mean, LinkedIn's a social media platform, right? So if you see people doing all this networking and you think, oh, I have to do that because everybody else that's successful is doing this, so I have to do this thing, and it might not be your path, but it's just the
Mhm.
common path that you're seeing all the time. So
Right. Yeah, the show of the connected mindset we had this last Friday was the healed hustle, and it was how slowing down speeds you up. It's right on that point of, we're all in this hustle culture, and most of us are hustling because we're broken. Like, we're not broken physically, but we don't have that linkage back to the why, or we're
mhm,
running towards worldly views. And we talked a lot about how like slowing down and finding those small moments of peace really can speed up your growth, so you don't have to do that hustle. You have to work hard. There's a difference between like hustling just to hustle versus like working hard and working towards something. We talked a lot about that on the show, and I'll make sure you have the link to that. But it's a big topic right now. I think people are glorifying the hustle, and it's putting people in a very bad mental state, which that's where everything starts, right? It starts with mental health, and then you bring that into the world to impact people and serve others and all of those types of things. But what it's doing is giving them this false, like, I'm not enough, and then it's a mental health, crash, crisis, whatever you want to put to it. And
yeah,
that's one of the downsides of social media. There's a lot of upside. Like, there's a lot of great things, connection, and communication that social media does. But that's something definitely for people to look out for, whether they're a business owner or not, is finding what feels right to you, how you can build more trust with yourself by keeping the promises to yourself that you make that are your promises. They're not a promise that one of the social media gods or goddesses created for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to set people up to be their best self, so they can bring their best self into the world, and that's going to help you impact more and more people and look back and not have any regrets.
Yeah. Put the link in the comments for once we hop off the call, because I think that would be a good thing for other people to be able to see
Yeah.
as well if they have questions on this or they're dealing with this topic. I'd be the first to admit I'm actively working on that. We talked very briefly in our little bit of time before the show about it. How after this, I think I'm done with my work for the day and I'm going to go home and do personal work, which is crazy because it's a Tuesday afternoon and I should be working. And I've found in the past 6 months that I've done a lot of work just to work, to
Yeah.
say that I'm working because I need to feel productive, because that's what business owners do. And we feel productive. And if I don't work, then I don't know, the business could crash, right? And that's not the case. And so I read bits and pieces of that 4 Hour Work Week book. It's a lot to digest, but I'm really trying to audit my time and figure out where am I working pointlessly. And I think a lot of times I can spend a whole day answering my emails and just that makes me feel productive. But did I need to go through all that? Did I need to fine tooth comb everything? And
Mhm.
so that's a good one too. But also when you're an employee, sometimes you have to work just to work to meet that time clock. So
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
I think, one thing that we as a society are going to always struggle with, because you want to meet that 40-hour work week. So you got to sit at work and do nothing, even though, or just work to work, even though
Yeah.
just to hit your 40 hours. So,
I know. Yeah, that's what the tech giants put in place for all of us to follow, and we're just following it
mhm,
without even thinking about it. So
mhm,
it's good to work hard. It's good to have a mission and pursue it
yeah.
unrelentlessly. But it's good to take a sidestep for a minute and just say, what am I really doing, and why am I doing it? And I think that's something everybody can do and walk away with.
Yeah. So we've got a few minutes left, Greg. Is there anything that you think the audience might have questions on that we didn't address that we want to touch on before we're done with the show?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's top of mind for me, obviously, I spoke about trust and how you can build trust with yourself by keeping those promises to yourself. One of the books I'm in the middle of, which I want to share, it's called Gap and Gain. And we talked a little bit about this before the show. And they talk a lot about high performers who have found their own version of success actually look backwards more than we think about in society, and they find gratitude in all the progress they've made over time. Because if we all look back, we've made an immense amount of progress. You could be going through the worst thing in your life in this moment, but you can look back and appreciate a lot of the progress you've made up to this point, no matter where you're at. But a lot of people think that the gain comes from the future casting, the vision, and that's what's going to help you be successful by accomplishing that mission. But this book does a study on like 20 high performers. Some of them found success, some didn't. And the commonality, the common strand, was that the best people, the people that found that most fulfillment, and happiness, and society's version of success, and had that feeling of I was able to accomplish what I set out to do. They find ways to look back, and that's what a lot of people think about as presence. That's a book I recommend everybody checking out. Um, and then I'm like I call myself like a breakthrough junkie. Like I always try to find that next breakthrough for myself. And I was at a conference recently and I was talking about like, what is a breakthrough? How do we get more of those feelings when we connect two dots and we're like, wow, that's how those things connect in my own life, for myself, whether that's in your business or your personal life, or like you're trying to reach that next, that weight record, like lifting wise. Like how do I position my body? And when you do it, you're like, wow, that's a feeling that makes you feel alive. So like, how do we get more of those breakthroughs? And most of the time it has something to do with information, like finding an organization of information that makes sense.
Yeah.
Meaningful connections, like having conversations like this with other people around you. Be like, hey, I learned this new thing. What do you think about it? And they may give you that other piece of information that helps you have a breakthrough. And I think that definition for me is important because I always thought about it as just finding that next piece of information. And I was missing the connection part, like truly connecting, not asking Google or Chat GPT, but like going to somebody either that I just met or somebody that I already know and say like, hey, I'm thinking through this, like in my business or in my personal life, like what are your thoughts? And they have so many different experiences that they're probably just going to say the first thing that comes to mind. And how many times that's created a breakthrough for me has been amazing. And I want more people to experience that like lift and that feeling of being alive. So I encourage everybody to go out there and find that next breakthrough just by, speaking with others about something you're thinking about actively. Oftentimes we're going through an internal battle and we never bring that to the outside world because we're going back to that point, scared of what those other people might think of
Yeah.
us. But it may just give you what that small piece of information to help you, get to that next step or achieve that next level that you want to get to.
Absolutely. Gosh, you need you to come back and talk more. I want to talk more about the breakthroughs at some
Mhm.
point because that's a super easy trap. I use ChatGPT all the time and I've read it because it's a lonely journey whenever
Mhm.
you're an entrepreneur who's going to understand ChatGPT. As crazy as that sounds, it has all the data from everybody else. So it's like, I'm just going to ask it questions. And so
Yeah.
because whenever you do ask a real person, then you're letting them in onto your problem. So I think that is would be a great topic to talk about. And then AI as well, because we kind of touched on that at some point, but it's so real, it's so new, it's different for every industry. And so I think that's a great one. And I also wrote down
Mhm.
athletes because I think that being athletic, having some kind of physical stimulus, physical outlet can help you with your mindset and everything that you're going through and offer a new perspective. And so I love talking to other athletes, other people that train. And I know that you have a really good dial in on that process. So we definitely need to chat some more on
Okay.
those things.
Absolutely. Happy to come back on. And the athletic side is why I am where I am.
Yeah.
So I love to talk about that. And I'm more of a how do I set myself up to feel good because I know I think good when I feel good. Most people think if I think good, then I'll feel good. So I always switch those up and say if I
Mm-hmm.
can make myself feel good, then I'll go out in the
Yeah.
world and think well and think clear. And
Mm-hmm.
that's important for how I approach each day. So happy to dive into that at a later time.
Yeah, Joe Rogan. I'm a big Joe Rogan listener. And one of the things that he said is that when you train and you put yourself through the hardest stimulus that you can, so whatever that looks like for you, benching 405, whatever the case may be, and you put yourself through that physical trauma and you're able to get over it and that sense of accomplishment and the endorphins, nothing else can be as hard as those things. And it really sets everything else into perspective. And yeah, there could be things that are harder, but it grounds you and it puts you in a space where that's the only thing you can think about. And so I always draw back on that whenever I'm training. It's like if I can train harder, everything else is a little bit easier. It's just about
Yeah,
perspective.
I love that. I think a lot of people look down or like criticize people like David Goggins and things of that nature. And he
Oh
says
yeah.
like get hard. But
Yeah.
really what he's saying is choose your hard. If you
Yep.
choose your hard, like the world turns in your favor. Like that's when people say like manifestation and things. I
Yeah.
think when you choose hard, when it comes to things that prepare you for that moment, the moment is like flawless and you're in like a flow. And I've felt that periodically throughout my career in sports and in business. And I think it's the only way to do it because if you're waiting for the world to throw hard at you and you're not training yourself to be able to navigate it, it's just going to keep pushing you down. There's no way out of it. So I'm a huge believer in that.
Absolutely. Well, it has been a pleasure, Greg. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to this live. We'll definitely have to have Greg back. Let me know if you're interested in that athletic conversation because we can definitely dial into that. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And until next time, bye.